I was a pastor for about 20 years and actually pastored at a church not too far from here, west of Dayton. And then God called me into the business world. I joined a consulting company. I now work with outsourced finance people. Am I moving around a lot?
I'm going to steal my notes back.
There you go. Yeah, you want your notes. That's great. And I learned something in that transition. And one was, while I was a pastor, I was very good at applying my faith life to my work. I mean, that's kind of what a pastor is supposed to do, right? I went to school for that. I went to conferences for that, all that good stuff. And yet, when I went to transition out of that world, I found it really hard to make the connection. I thought I would be good at it, right? I was the guy that people would come to for answers, and here I oftentimes didn't have answers myself. And so there's two things I've learned through that, because God showed me pretty quickly this wasn't just a temporary detour. This was actually something he wanted to teach me, and hopefully I would have an opportunity to share that with other people. And so I want to share two truths with you and just some places in Scripture that have helped me kind of connect this and find a real sense of purpose in what I do. There's some aspects of my job that it's easy, and I get to talk to people about what drives them. We're a Christian-owned company. There's a lot of things that kind of get involved with that. Sometimes it just isn't. I'm just like crunching through numbers or just pushing stuff out the door. And where is the purpose in that? Where is the spiritual significance in that? So I want to answer those questions a little bit. So the first thing that I've learned is that this tension between scarcity and abundance is actually part of God's design for creation. So scarcity and abundance are kind of big words. Sometimes we can think of it as supply and demand, right? There's a very businessy term. You don't have enough of something, you have too much of something else, right? The market kind of figures out how to fix that. Another place we experience scarcity and abundance, maybe when you move to a new city, you have an abundance of time, but you have a scarcity of friends, right? You haven't really got to know people yet. And so a lot of times you're kind of sitting at home by yourself, or maybe, you don't have a lot to do on the weekend and you end up going for hikes in the park or whatever. Well, then you start to meet people and your calendar fills up, and all of a sudden you have an abundance of friends, but now you have a scarcity of time. You just can't do the things that you used to do or the things that you told yourself you would do. In life, we constantly deal with this tension. And I kind of had the attitude that, well, if I just did what I was supposed to, if I just lived how God wanted me to live, I wouldn't have to deal with this tension. I would have enough of everything and I would be fine. You think of the Apostle Paul, who says, I've learned to be content with plenty and with not having a lot, right? So contentment is one thing. It doesn't mean that the tension goes away. And another thought I had was, well, okay, maybe that's just the result of sin in the world. Surely if there wasn't sin in the world, then we wouldn't have this tension. Well, actually, I think it's part of God's design because it points us to something, which is the second thing I'm going to share with us in a minute about that. So let me just point out a couple things from Genesis chapter 1. And that is that God actually created the world with scarcity built in. So Genesis 1:1, we know it, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was empty and void, and darkness was over the waters. Now that's scarcity. Like that's nothing, literally nothing, right? So you have a God who is infinite and outside of time, cannot be contained in space and time, who chooses to reveal his character in a creation that is defined by space and time. We don't know anything but space and time. So there's way more of God than he was able to put into creation. There just is. And that's fine for plants and animals. They only know what their senses can tell them. But because we're created in God's image, we actually have this sense, right? This idea of eternity in our hearts, this realization that there is something beyond this life. And yet we're always up against the limits. We're always kind of dealing with the fact that we can't get to it. So God actually built this dynamic of scarcity and abundance into creation. And we see that carried out in Genesis 1, where he divides things and then fills them, right? And he goes through the days of creation, slowly filling up this empty and dark earth. He fills it with light and he fills it with plants and animals and all of these things that he says, be fruitful and multiply and create swarms of them. And so God does that. But then something else happens when he gets to creating mankind. And that is that he actually equips us in a particular way to handle this tension of scarcity and abundance. It's actually our purpose for why we're created. Because it says in Genesis 1:26, we just heard these verses a few minutes ago, let us create man in our image, in our likeness, and let him have dominion over the fish of the sea and the birds and the heavens and the livestock and of all of the earth and all the creeping things. And so all of these things that God has said, be fruitful and multiply, and some of them fill the earth, right? All of that he's telling man and woman that they need to have control over that. They need to manage that in a sense. And in fact, when God says he created man in his image and he blessed them and he said, be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth and subdue it. It's interesting because every one of those other commands, be fruitful, multiply, and rule or have dominion, has been given to some other part of creation beforehand. The plants and the animals were told to be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth. The lights in the sky, the sun, the moon, were told to rule over the day and the night. But then mankind is given this unique challenge to have dominion, to harness, to manage this creation, right? That's the unique purpose and the unique cause that he has. And as I think about it, I have the opportunity not just to work in a company. I work in a company that serves other companies. So I not only get to work with our team, I get to work with a lot of teams. I work with engineers, and I work with manufacturers, and I work with salespeople, and I work with service people, and all of these kinds of things. And so I've really kind of got a crash course on the amazing things that businesses do and the incredible ways people have figured out how to make money. And I think it's kind of fun to take this idea of being fruitful, multiply, fill the earth, and figure out where does work fit with that, right? So if you're being fruitful, only God can create something out of nothing. But we all the time take things that God has made and make unique things out of them. We take raw materials and turn it into something, right? We take creative ideas and concepts and we express it in writing or in other ways of doing that, right? We develop things, even writing computer code. Just to think, you can write code that makes a piece of machinery do something for you. That's a really creative and fruitful kind of endeavor. If you're multiplying, you're doing more of the same, right? Production, sourcing. I think finance. I mean, it's not just that we do math, it's that we figure out how does things get paid for and what's the most efficient way to do it? And are we really understanding the costs and are we applying those things in the right place? So that's a way of taking what we have and extending it, making it work any further. Filling, you enter new ideas, logistics, supply chain, right? Who knew about supply chain before COVID? Now everybody knows about supply chain, right? Supply chain people are our heroes if they can put the food we want on our shelves and make sure we don't run out of toilet paper. No one was thinking about supply chain. Now everybody's thinking about supply chain. And all of these things around subduing, management, compliance, enforcement, safety, medical, all of these places are part of fulfilling God's original command. Fill the earth, subdue it, be fruitful, and multiply. But here's what happens. We know the fact that this isn't just how things run, right? Because in Genesis chapter 3, sin came into the world. And the second thing I've learned, that scarcity and abundance, there's a tension there we have to manage. And that tension is just frustrating sometimes. And there's an aspect of frustration that is a result of sin in the world, but there's a part of frustration that I think also points us to our purpose, what God really wants us to do in our work. So let's look at the frustration that came from sin first, and then we'll look at the purpose that comes from that. So work is not a curse, but work has been affected by the curse of the fall. So we know in Genesis chapter 3 that after the man and the woman sin by eating the fruit, and they hide, and God calls them out, and they confess to what they've done. And then he goes through the curses, the serpent and the woman, and then he says to the man, cursed is the ground because of you. In pain you shall eat of it. Thorns and thistles it shall bring forth for you. By the sweat of your face you shall eat bread. So the very thing we need to survive is now fighting us. The very way that we were going to care for ourselves by just providing food, there's now a battle there. It's hard. And it's hard. Like my parents had a big garden growing up. It was hard work, right? If you work on a farm, I grew up in a farming community. It's hard work. Like we've done incredible things as far as mechanization and automation. It's still an incredible amount of hard work. And so many of these things now, there's opposition, there's thorns and thistles in the way. It takes effort. And there's a sense of accomplishment in that work, but it's still work. It still is something that we have to overcome. But there's another aspect to this that I don't want us to lose, because it would be easy to just kind of feel like, well, work is just this thing we have to do, and work is just this thing that it's hard, and when do I get to stop, and why isn't it easier? But there's another piece of this where I think our frustration actually points to our sense of purpose. Because if we are God's children, particularly as believers, we should sense the effects of the curse more than the people around us. We should have an awareness. We should have a spiritual sense that there's more going on there than just this is something, a process that needs to be tweaked or something that needs to be fixed or whatever. There's a bug in the system, right? There's something that we need to uncover and get out and help redeem it, restore it to what God's purpose was. And so when we see the effect of sin, we know that the answer for sin is the gospel. It's the only thing that changes it. The only thing that effectively reverses the curse is the gospel message, and is the fact that Christ died to, as it says in Colossians chapter 1, to reconcile things on heaven and things on earth to himself through his blood shed on the cross. And so when we face a frustration, we need to make sure that, we don't just see it as an excuse to blow our top and act in a way that we shouldn't. But sometimes there's things that just get to us. There's things that even once the problem's kind of solved, our mind is still like, well, why did that problem come up? How are we going to solve that next time? Those are ways that I think God has particularly equipped us, and I would say given us a purpose to help overcome the effects of the curse and apply that, bring liberation, bring freedom to people through that. I think often of Romans 8, verses 20 and 21, where the Apostle Paul writes this. He says, creation was subjected to frustration. That kind of captures it, doesn't it? Right? There's just this we think of Murphy's Law, anything that can go wrong will go wrong, right? There's just this sense like things should work and they don't. And it takes so much effort to get them working and to keep them working. So the creation was subjected to frustration, but in the hope that the creation itself will be liberated from its bondage to decay and brought into the glorious freedom of the children of God. So just think what it's saying there. There is this frustration over the created world because of sin. But God has begun this process of liberation, of freedom. And it starts with us. It starts with those of us who know him, who have been called by him, who have seen our lives changed. And now we have eyes to see what could be in the world around us. And that doesn't just mean what could be in church on Sunday, although it definitely applies there. It applies to the place that God has put you and the training you have and the opportunities you have and the skills you have, the experiences you have that make you good at what you do. He's put you in the place that you're in for a reason. And when you see a frustration, something that you're just like, it shouldn't be that way. That's a sense that God is saying, yeah, because I put you here to do something about it. I'm opening your eyes to that so that you can work at it and apply the abilities I've given you to show what that is. So I like to think in terms of the frustrations that come, it's like, okay, is this just a problem that needs to be solved? Do I just need to, tweak my process or fix my machine or whatever it is to get over this? Or is this something that gets at me in a deeper way? Do I walk away saying it shouldn't be like this? And if that's the thought on my mind, I start to say, okay, God, why do I see it that way? I work with other people, and I'll see a situation and they're just like, whatever, that's the way it is. And I'm like, but it shouldn't be that way, right? There's a difference in our reaction. And that's because there's a sense of purpose that God has given me about freeing other people up in their work, about making sure that they have some mental and emotional capacity while they're working to be relational with the people around them and to make a difference in the people's lives the way God has called us to do it. So I've learned a lot just from kind of seeing those two truths, finding them in Scripture, and learning to apply them to myself. There is a tension between scarcity and abundance. I am never going to feel like I have enough time to do everything I need to do. I am never going to feel like I have enough energy and creativity to do all the things the best way they should be done. I'm just not. I'm just always going to be fighting that battle. That is what it means to live as a finite person in a fallen world, but someone who has the image of God in them. But when I get frustrated, I try to just ask the question, okay, am I just wrong here? Like, is this just upset me? Did someone just kind of get at me in a way I didn't like? Okay, I need to deal with that separately. But if that's not the case and the frustration is still there, I say, God, are you awakening something in me so that I can do something about this? I can see a way that this could be better, and you've put me here to do it.